You ready? All right. Today's July something. Mid-July. Welcome to July's boat shop update. I apologize for this. I was messing with some dock chains earlier, so I don't always dress all filthy like this. It's pretty quiet in here right now. We have a program out on the water, a bunch of kids out rowing actually up the powwow to downtown Amesbury for a tour of the Amesbury Carriage Museum, which is pretty cool. So if you watch our last update, you'll see quite a bit has changed. We got rid of some boats, and we've got this one here. It was probably upside down last time, but it's been right side up for the planking to be finished. And now we've turned it back upside down so that we could fair the hull, which is a back-breaking affair that John can take most of the credit for. And then we caulked it, and then we puttied it. So one of the things with this boat is that in order to get this oak to bend in, make this twist, we had to use oak that was pretty green. The unfortunate thing is when it takes a while to build a boat, that oak will shrink over the course of that process. And so our seams ended up pretty big here. So we kind of loosely caulked them with oakum. And then we put the putty in and put a nice cove in it. So when that all squeezes together, it'll be nice and watertight. Anyway, this is looking good. The next steps here will be to either go around and take care of some of these defects or just roll a coat of primer on it, and then usually the primer coat will turn up a lot of those defects that you have to go back and fix before you start putting top coats on. And then while it is upside down, we'll put some bilge keels and things on it just because it's easier. And then when it goes right side up, we can start doing the interior. And ideally, because this boat is so heavy and awkward, all that stuff on the outside's done, and we're pretty much hands off at that point. We have started, John has started, these two new Mohonk skiffs. So the last time we looked, I think we had some skiffs just about ready to go out to Mohonk Mountain House. So we delivered 2 new rebuilds and 1 brand new boat. Here you'll see we've got a plywood bottom and plywood garboard. They've both received a layer of fiberglass and epoxy on the inside before they went together. And then we're traditional planking above that. These frames here are the shape of the pattern for this particular boat. And as we build, we're going to end up cutting into this. And this is actually what John is preparing for over here. So we'll go look at that. Weave our way over. So this is what a Lowell's boat shop boat looks like. It is, we call these builder's notes. So basically someone who developed this boat probably started with a bottom pattern that we already have, or mix and mashed a couple of measurements from 2 or 3 of them together to get a bottom that was a good width and length for the kind of boat that you're looking for. And then took some frame patterns, in this case, frames, 14 OB skiff. So we took a pattern from a 14-foot outboard skiff and used those. In the case of the stem, we used a stem from a 12-foot outboard skiff. So some patterns from other boats you can use on a bottom and make a completely new and different boat. But the real thing, and this actually has more information than any of these others about the timber cuts, and that's what this whole mishigas up here is all about. Those are all the timber cuts for this boat, and it is kind of confusing. So we're going to lay it out for you here, and the first one, plank number 1, which is the one right above the garboard here, there are no timber cuts, so it's in the same plane as the garboard itself. And then it says number 2, all up 10 inches. So John, this is one of John's first go-arounds at this, and when I first did it, I didn't know what any of that meant. So the deal is, I'm going to move this for 1 second, John. Take the straight edge here and put the corner right on the upper part of the lap, and then I'm going to rotate it in until the 10, this is up 10 inches, until the 10 is just what do they call that, tangent with the intersects the frame there, and that is your 10-inch. You're going to do that all the way along. John's done that here. He's just utilizing the inside there, and because our transom doesn't really have a particular shape, it doesn't come from a pattern, that's going to be based on the rest of these. And so again, because there is so much information here, it says forward is out a hair from M1. So this is M1. So if you look along, at this point with them all laid up, you can put your eye on it and you'll see that 4, I would say, is out a little bit more than a hair. M1 and M2 are even, meaning this here and this should be pretty much parallel, which they are. And then aft, which is this guy, is in a bit from M2. So that's in a little bit. I would call that in more than a bit. And then this guy, the transom, is in a hair from there. So what's a hair and what's a bit? That's kind of left to the builder's own eye. And in my case, I would say that's in a bit. I would say this is probably in more than a hair. So I'll typically start, that's basically parallel there. And usually if I can see half of the one before it, so I usually use the straight 1 inch wide rules from a combo square. If I can see like half the top of it, it's like a ½ an inch in, yeah. That's typical for this. Okay. But I would say that forward one is out a little ways. I would bring that in a little bit. And the idea is to get the nice gentle sweep in the plank. That is, come out a little bit more. That's pretty much parallel now. A little more. One more. About there. Yeah. Maybe a hair like that. So the next plank, the shear plank, and this is fairly typical for these boats, the cut. So what's going to happen is we're going to draw these lines, and then we're going to trim off a flat onto the frame, dub it basically, for the next plank, and then that will go on. And then for the shear plank, we have to dub it again. And the shear plank, typically, that's called up with the lap. So you essentially take this straight edge, like this guy, and you lay it flat across your lap like so, and you carry that line straight up, and then you trim that off. And the beauty of up with the lap is that you don't have to put a corresponding bevel on the lower edge of your next plank. So if everything goes up with the lap, that shear plank essentially has no bevels and just goes right on there. So, and then to replicate this on the other side, what I will typically do is take a big level, and I'll level across, and then I'll take the angle once I've cut it and transfer it around to the other side, so you know that both sides. And even once I have those lines, though, I'll do this whole process and eyeball them to make sure that they all, because leveling across assumes a lot of things that may not be true, especially here. So, and then, yep, working around. So this boat's on hiatus for the summer. The kids aren't here, our apprentices, so this guy, fingers crossed, we'll have done this fall. Still love a buyer for it who wants a Haven 12.5. Starting to look pretty good, though. Pretty good. And then, oh yeah.
Catching this for the first time, Graham, can you say just a little bit more? I know you've done a previous update, but just in case someone catches this for the first time.
Yes, so this here is a Haven 12.5, and this particular boat is being built by our apprentices. And the molds for this and a lot of the materials were actually donated to us. A gentleman up in New Hampshire had a dream to build this boat, and he got as far as making the molds and buying a lot of the stuff, and then he developed, he got ill and couldn't continue. And so his widow gave us all of that to build it with. So this has gone through COVID, been around for a long time, but we're closing in on it. The lead keel is on. Get some little bit of topsides paint here. This is Tomowski green, William Tomowski, one of our apprentices. And so developed that color with Kirby, George Kirby paint. And really, it's just a lot of the fuss work now, making the rig, and a lot of the rig is actually has been made. And it's those last few final steps of assemblage and putting it together. But any boat builder knows the last 10% takes 50% of the time, somehow. Look at this old teeny boat. I just picked this up yesterday. So one of our boat builders, Mike Britton, who lives in, he now lives in Tennessee, in Memphis, he built us a plug off of which we made a mold, and now this is an oyster bar, basically. So we're going to start offering these up, put a bunch of ice in here, a bunch of oysters. We're going to trim it out all nice, like with some mahogany on the rail. But and then you got a little basin for the water. So a little something new for us, but pretty much totally in keeping with what we do. And that's pretty hot, pretty nice looking.
How will people be able to get one of those, or is that, when do you think that will be?
If people want one of these, you'll have to get on a list, because the list is currently long. So we used to make these in wood, which took some time, and you have the associated issues with ice melting a lot of fresh water and wood being soaked all the time. So we just decided to go ahead and start making them out of fiberglass with wood trim. And if you would really like one of those, you can just email us here at the shop, and I can fill you in all about it. So, I mean, we'll just keep going. This here, we got a transom going for a dory. So we have a community build starting Friday, which is we're building a bank dory for ourselves. We're slowly replacing the fleet of dories that we have outside that are now getting to be almost 30 years old. And so they're getting to the end of their realistic lifespan. So we're slowly, with the help of apprentices and the help of the community, starting to replace those. So Friday we'll start a community build, meaning we'll have people from the community come in and help us out, and that'll be ongoing probably for several months. Realistically, it'll go into the apprentice season, and then the apprentices will take over and complete that boat as well. So transom going together. Here we've got frames and stems for that same project right there. Don't look at that one, look at these. Stems for that same project. So we have several of these dories to build. The one for ourselves, for this community build, I have a program up in Kittery that'll be starting another one in September. I have a program actually happening at the Governor's Academy in Newbury or Byfield, and they'll be building one over the course of the winter. And then we have 3 dories to build for the Long Beach lifeguards, and so we're going to need all kinds of stems and transoms and frames to put all that together. Coming along in here, this is a long update. Long update. So take 3, bring 1. We took 3 boats out to Mohonk and came back with 1. This particular boat here got a little busted up out there. It's actually not in bad shape. The problem is they had an issue with their fire suppression system in the storage area in the winter, and this boat filled up to the rails with water and then froze. And so what happened was, actually not a lot of terrible things happened, with the exception of this right here. So the ice, there's a seat inside, the ice got under the seat and the riser right here, and just basically as it froze, it expanded upwards and pulled the seam of the transom apart. So what we're going to end up doing is having to cut this bit out and fix that. But while it's here, we are starting to replace a lot of these old bottoms with new bottoms, because the way that they had been building the old bottoms in the 80s, which is when this boat's from, I can tell from the plywood, the epoxy would crack on the inside, they'd get wet on the inside, get saturated. They wouldn't really rot because oxygen couldn't get in there to allow whatever needs to happen for it to rot, but they would just get saturated and get super heavy. So what we've been doing is cutting these off, making a new plywood fiberglass on the inside bottom, sticking it on, trimming it, and then glassing over the whole thing. And then we will rework the rail structure as well, because they are going to a rail structure, not the double rail that we're used to seeing with the 2 separate rails with blocks in between, but a full solid rail, which is a lot easier for them to maintain the varnish on. So that'll happen with this guy. And I think as far as boat building projects are concerned, that is the crux of it. We have our shallop here, or our mini shallop from Plymouth. Our couple of guys have been working on stripping this down so we can make it all nice and pretty again. And we're going to have to pretty soon here start digging at that garboard on the other side to get it off. It's a little checked up, and it's, you know, the hood end is popped away from the stem a little bit, so we're going to have to get into that, make some new floors. But this is the kind of job we're pecking away at as we have time and manpower. They're not pushing us for this, and so it's not the squeaky wheel at the moment. Whit, I hope you don't watch this. And that's it. So it's now July, so into next month we'll be into our community build. We have a number of events coming up as well, a couple of dinners, maybe a concert. So stay tuned to the website for that, and hopefully we'll bring you this in about another month.